US is too important for Europe culturally, historically, militarily. So they can't simply abandon the relationship. But at the same time, China is a very big economic partner, and they can't abandon that relationship as well.
Xi Jinping's, when he gets there, who are China's well-wishers? Where does he have most stay? Where does he have to do a sort of PR job or convincing certain countries within Europe? Because it's not as you say in the it's not a block, it's not a singular block when it comes to China, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, the visit started in Paris. I think it's about to conclude. China sees France as a critical interlocutor because it is not seen as a mere follower of the United States, although it's part of the West, that it has independent thinking on world affairs. Therefore, if Xi Jinping's strategy is to probe the differences between US and Europe, President Macron is clearly the right interlocutor for them, and that's the reason why probably the visit has started here. If you remember last year, Macron was in China, insisted that look, France is not going to be a follower of America on Taiwan. And this last week, just before Xi Jinping came to Paris, he said the need for a reset. China is important, and that there's need for a reset in the relations. So I think here is the deal. I think France is trying to find a way of engaging China that would lead to a more balanced economic relationship, because it's become very, very uneven. While Xi Jinping is asking Macron to restrain the US from getting into a Cold War competition, while Macron is also asking Xi, look, try and persuade President Putin of Russia to take a more moderate position on Ukraine. So I think there's a lot to talk about. But the key point is this: Xi is looking for the divergences across the Atlantic between US and Europe. And for Macron, it's really about redefining the relationship with China in such a way that Europe does not get too far behind between the two great powers, that is US and China.
So, one thing that came out from the piece, everyone should read it. It's on the indianexpress.com, and there should be a link in the description wherever you're watching this video. Is that, say, even say Germany and France, arguably the two biggest powers in Europe and certainly in the European Union. There's not complete agreement on everything. Not on Russia, perhaps, not on China, certainly. And as you call it a trilemma for Europe. There's also the role in this balancing. I mean, the potential of a Trump presidency makes it, if US is going to be more isolationist again and say, that pay for allies need to pay and need to, how does that figure in? How do you see Europe navigating that for now? Because there are no easy answers, of course, but still.
No, I think for Europe, for a long time, Macron has talked about building European sovereignty, European autonomy, and a independent approach to global geopolitics. But I think what we saw happen in the last 2 years is really President Putin has exposed Europe's incapacity to defend itself, that it had to rely on the United States to supply arms to Ukraine. Though the fact is Russia is threatening to undermine the order, it's taken the territory of a sovereign country, but Europe is unable to get its act together. For example, when Macron says, look, if Russia breaks through the current line in eastern Ukraine, Europe should be prepared to send European troops into Ukraine. But Germany immediately said, no, we can't do that. So, and there are differences between the countries which border Russia to the west, the Central European countries, which have a deep sense of, history of Russian imperialism. Therefore, they fear Russia's threat far more than those who are once removed. So therefore, when Macron talks about European sovereignty, Poland will say, look, we're not sure if you can actually defend us. We need the Americans to balance the Russians. So the Central Europeans are deeply attached to US because they see US is the only one which is capable of defending them, while Germany and France are not in a position to do so. But then what we're having happening in the US is, of course, the Trump is saying, look, I don't defend anybody if they don't pay their share of defense. So that induces an uncertainty into way Europe has to deal with the Russia threat. Europe has to deal with the China challenge because Americans are telling Europeans, join us in isolating China on the economic front. So I think Trump complicates it. But here is the problem. I mean, US is too important for Europe culturally, historically, militarily. So they can't simply abandon the relationship. But at the same time, China is a very big economic partner, and they can't abandon that relationship as well. So I think they're really torn between the three challenges. One, the US isolationism, Russian expansionism, and the Chinese economic rise and its pressures on Europe to stop the de-risking strategy.
And then you also bring out from this piece something, a lesson, or at least some warnings or something for India, which is that for Delhi, which has started engaging Europe, certainly in the last 5-10 years, there has been individually with France, of course, we have very close ties and a number of deals. Defense. You're reaching out to Western Europe, you're reaching out to places like the Nordic countries and certain smaller groupings. But if China is doing all of this, if let's say these kinds of outreaches by President Xi are somewhat successful, that places India in a more precarious position globally. How do you see, what are the 2 or 3 things that New Delhi should do to just hedge against this kind of Chinese success, if we can call it that in Europe?
Yeah. So here is the paradox of Europe. I mean, Europe is really the third largest economic entity. I mean, taking as a collective the European Union, US is number 1, China is number 2, and European Union is number 3 in terms of economic size. But unlike Washington or Beijing, Brussels is not a geopolitical entity. They're struggling to build a common defense and strategic policies. So the challenge for us is Europe, when it makes its choices, does it get closer to the US? Does it get further away from the US? Does it cut deals with the Russians and the Chinese? The choices that the Europeans make, because they're such a large entity on such an important theater, will have effects on India's relations with the 3 same powers. So, for example, as I said, Europe sees Russia as the big problem and China as a big market, which is distance. China directly does not threaten Europe. While for India, it is that China is a bigger threat and Russia is a partner. So therefore, I think what choices they make, how they play between these 3 powers will have an effect on us. And I think the answer for that is really we have to step up our engagement with Europe. Because traditionally, we've not really paid much attention to the European Union. Things have changed in the last few years. But my sense is the big play for Europe means India cannot stand by as a passive spectator. If it wants to protect itself from the kind of outcomes that could come, which are harmful to India, it has to do more with Europe, both on the economic front, on the business front, on the technological front, and on the security front, because India has really avoided getting into serious engagement with Europe on security issues. So these have to change for us if we want to protect ourselves. In the, shall we say, the scramble for Europe, we need to be more actively involved in this old continent, which is large, which is a major source of technology and capital. Therefore, I think raising Europe to a higher level in our diplomatic priorities should be an important task for the next government that will take charge in Delhi in June.
Great, sir. Thank you so much. Everyone, read the piece. It's on indianexpress.com, and we will see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Akash.